Welcome to Empowered Living. I'm Ann Shu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Empowered Living, the podcast where we have real conversations that help us build intentional, thriving relationships. I'm your host, Ann Shu, and today we're diving into a topic that affects so many of us, burnout. My guest today is Leah Brown, a trauma therapist and burnout expert who helps individuals and families navigate stress in healthier, more sustainable ways. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, stretched too thin, or like you're constantly running on empty, this episode is for you. Leah and I talk about how to recognize the early signs of burnout, not just in ourselves, but in our spouses and kids, and how to take action before it spirals out of control. She shares why some personalities might be more prone to burnout, how stress can actually be a good thing, and the practical strategies we can use to prevent burnout in ourselves and in the people we love. We'll also discuss boundary setting, how to reset when you feel stuck in a career or lifestyle that's draining you, and Leah's Burnout Buster Blueprint, which has helped so many people shift away from burnout and into a healthier, more energized life. This conversation is full of wisdom and actionable takeaways that can help you and your family build resilience, set better boundaries, and avoid the burnout cycle. Let's dive in. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Good. Ann, how are you?
Great. So excited to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's dive right in. So I want to hear, I know you've been working in the burnout space for quite a while and you're doing a ton of work with clients in that area. And I would love to hear, what are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about burnout?
I would say that one of them is that it's inevitable is one. Another, we can be in this place where we're kind of expecting, oh, I'm doing so much, so I'm going to get burnt out. And there's ways to be able to prevent that from happening. I think another thing is kind of the opposite end is that, oh, it would never happen to me. Because it is, and does not respect persons. The rate of burnout is almost the same for men and women, actually. And it goes across all different generations, all the way from, those of you who have kids, I know this is for families, those of you who have kids realize that either your kids or maybe some of their friends have experienced a really overload of stress. And that is one of the big causes of burnout.
Yeah. So sounds like there's two ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
That it's definitely going to happen and thinking it's definitely not going to happen. So
yes.
Let's go to the one thinking that it's definitely going to happen. What are some of those early signs if we want to recognize it in ourselves or other people? What should we be looking for? How do we know it's happening?
So one of the things to be looking for is that burnout is it's from an overload of stress. And so when you start to notice that you're feeling stressed, usually our bodies will tell us before we recognize it. And so if there are things that you recognize, oh, I do this when I feel stressed, that would be something to pay attention to. I know for me personally, if I start chewing on the inside of my cheek, then I know, oh, I'm stressed about something. And that's kind of my tell, even before I start to say, oh, I'm feeling stressed. And so being able to be aware of your body, if you're having pain or discomfort in your body somewhere, if you're having a lot of tension in your shoulders, if your jaw hurts, you might be clenching down and not knowing it. Sometimes people will stop breathing because they're just feeling stressed. They'll hold their breath. Those are kind of physical things to notice. You have social things you can notice too. That can be either you feel like you can't spend the time with people that you want to spend with them. And so you'll feel that social pull of, I feel like I should do this, but I don't want to do this. I feel too overwhelmed. Another thing that's typical is to be short with people because your levels are high, especially short with your family, because when things are stressful, they're the people that usually get the brunt of it. They're the people that get your quick answer or the frustration tone in your voice, or maybe even yelling or leaving in a huff, or those types of things could be an indicator that you're on that verge of burnout, or maybe you're already there.
Yeah, that's definitely me. That's when I start feeling it. That's what happens. I would say that's my first sign. What about noticing burnout in our spouses or our kids? What do you think we should be looking for?
Yeah, so I would say, especially with kids, if they are, and sometimes there's this hard part of, is this stress and overwhelm, or is this regular preteen teen behavior, right?
Yeah.
But being able to really pay attention to your kids and to notice, okay, are we having more arguments? Is there more tension in the home than normal? And being able to kind of have a sit down about it, and not in a grilling way, but be able to say, hey, I'm noticing. And honestly, I did this last night because we were decorating for Christmas, and I have 2 teenage boys and a young adult daughter and a 12-year-old at home. And we were just kind of, and my stepson, my bonus son, is home right now too. And he's 20. And so we're all trying to do this stuff, and people are frustrated, and people are getting on each other's nerves, and I'm getting frustrated, and my husband's getting frustrated. It's like, okay, we just need to stop and sit down and talk about it. And I asked, what are some of the things that you think are contributing to what's going on? And my daughter said, okay, so these are things that are contributing. And then these are other things. And she started picking other things that are going on in her life that were really causing her stress and pressure that I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't invited this opportunity for people to share. And everybody shared some things, but it was just really a great opportunity, instead of everyone going to their rooms mad at the end of the evening, to be able to kind of decompress things a little bit and see what are those pressures, what are those stressors. And when we can see what those are, if we can, then we have the opportunity to kind of turn them down instead of them continuing to build. I think if someone has reached burnout kid-wise, they kind of disengage. They are just, I talk about a lot of times our flourishing zone. Some people call it a window of tolerance, but it's this space. But when you're in the space, you can handle life. And sometimes we get to the place where we're like jumping out of that space and feeling this overwhelm. And we can be experiencing the overwhelm up here, where we're just kind of anxious or angry, or we can experience it below the line, which is kind of like flatlined, right? Almost like if you're on a lake, you want to have some breeze, right? You don't want to have nothing. And so you kind of get to that place where there's nothing, and where you are just really checked out. And that could be checked out like, all I want to do is play video games. Or it could be checked out, I just want to be in my room and no one talk to me. Like, there are just different ways that can look for teens and for children even. But being able to talk to them and give them that opportunity for you to be noticing what's their stress level looking like, so that you can be part of that. Oh, and then in a spouse. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so sometimes that is, we just know. We just know that something's off. And even if we don't know exactly what it is, it might be that their ability to do the things that they normally do, just kind of in that give and take, seems like it's not optimal, right? Something's bothering them, something's going on. And being able to, in that moment, start noticing, okay, and instead of taking it personally, notice what's going on with them. And is there something that my husband or my wife needs that is kind of, they usually can do it, but they can't anymore. Another big one is a loss of a sense of humor. That's especially something. Burnout kind of has a parallel with another term called compassion fatigue, when you're taking care of people a lot and you're taking care of people so much that you're not taking care of yourself. And when we reach that, one of the number one things to notice, and one of the first things, is that you stop finding things funny. You lose your sense of humor because you're just emotionally overwhelmed.
Yeah. Are there types of personalities that are more prone to burnout?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I would say burnout looks different with different personalities, but that every personality experiences burnout. And I would guess that it's pretty much the same. I usually use a DISC personality profile when I'm working with clients. And so with that, I would say that the way that we experience burnout is different. With someone who is a really fast moving person, they like to do things fast. They like to do lots of things, whether they're really task oriented or really people oriented. That burnout and that looks like just kind of a real slow down effect. All of a sudden things are really slowed down, or they might experience, I would say that they experience this kind of a slow down effect on what they're doing. I would say the person who is more reserved and caring and people oriented, it takes a lot for them to reach that point of feeling burnt out. But once they reach that point, it's kind of like, an example I like to use, it's like a rain barrel. It takes a long time to fill up a rain barrel with water. But if you take a rain barrel and you dump it across your desk, everything is gone. And so I would say that would be the person that it would be good to look out for, especially if that person is your spouse or maybe a child, that they can take a lot of things. They go with the flow a lot. When they get to the point where they've maxed out, where they've reached that burnout threshold, then it can be catastrophic for how it affects them and how it affects the other people around them.
Yeah. How do we help our kids avoid burnout?
That's great. So I work with people to help them to become burnout resistant. So that it's almost like, we talk about, I don't know if you remember Teflon pan commercials, right? That everything just slides out. And that's the goal, is to be in a place where we can avoid burnout. And so part of the way that we avoid burnout is understanding ourselves and our body. First of all, noticing what are the things that are too much for us. And that takes practice. It takes some, especially with kids, it takes some coaching to help them to understand what their personality is like and what helps them to feel good and what helps them to feel overwhelmed. And then another part of that is to have good community and connection. That can be community connection in the family. It can be with sports teams or with churches, or having kids to have that connection with other people is very important in preventing and avoiding burnout. And then the third thing would be, in conjunction with understanding their body, being able to relax their body, because we can't hold anxiety in a relaxed body. So learning different ways for grounding for them is really important. It can be as simple as, and you could do this little kids all the way up. Okay, everyone, tell me 5 things that you can see in the room right now. And everybody can name 5 things. Okay, I want you to notice 4 things you can feel with your body right now, and being able to kind of inventory that. I can feel my sweater. I can feel my shoes in my feet, my shoes in my feet, my feet in my shoes. And just being able to kind of go through that. And then to look at what are 3 things right now that you can hear. And so being able to just pay attention. And what you're doing is, as you're focusing on these things, it would be then 2 things that you can smell. And it's totally not cheating to smell your clothes or to smell something that you have around you or something like that. And then 1 thing that you can taste. And as we're turning our attention towards these very physical present things, it helps us to release that stress and that pressure. And so as we're teaching kids to be able to do these things, and you can go online and you can Google mindful activities for kids, and you will find tons of different things you can do. All the way from, hey, have your kids, when they're eating, explain what they taste What are the things that you taste in this food? What do you notice in this food? The temperature, the texture, all those things can help them to just refocus on the things that are not causing the pressure, to give them a break from that, but also teaches their body to relax. There's another would be something like progressive muscle relaxation, where you would tense a set of muscles and then relax them. And there's videos for that on YouTube where it just kind of walks you through. Hey, and there's some that have pictures where it shows you this is the muscle that you need to move and to constrict. And then just being able to relax in your body and to be able to have good community connection and to be able to understand yourself are very key in helping kids to be burnout resistant.
Okay, so if we see burnout in another adult, a best friend or a sibling or a parent or a coworker or somebody on our team, how do you think we should approach that conversation? How do we talk to them about it?
That's a really good question. I think always approaching it from, hey, I care about you, is number one. Being able to approach a coworker or a friend or a spouse that you notice is having some difficulty, and being able to just say, hey, how can I support you? I notice that you're feeling, it looks like you're overwhelmed by some things. Is there anything I can do for you to support you? Is there anything that I can listen to you talk about that would be helpful for you? And being able to open up that door. And once the door is open, being able to say, these are some things that I'm noticing. And I know that they are symptoms of burnout. And I just was wondering, how are you doing with that? And being able to, I find that people love it and appreciate it when people notice things about them beyond just, oh, I like your new hair or whatever, but just being able to say, hey, I noticed that even when I gave you a hug, you felt really tense. And that's not normal for you. Are you doing okay? Yeah. And leading with those things that show that you're paying attention to them instead of just trying to solve a problem makes a really big difference.
Do you think we should use the word burnout in this conversation?
I think that using the word burnout can be very helpful because it gives them a name for it, because sometimes people don't understand what's going on and don't have a vocabulary to help them. And that's the type of vocabulary that could be really helpful, and them being able to name what's going on for them. And always as a question, do you think you could be experiencing burnout? Is better than, I think you're burnt out. Yeah. So I think that would be really helpful.
So I've heard you talk about how sometimes stress is actually a good thing. It gives us signs. Can you talk a little bit about that and why stress is actually a good thing?
Sure. So when we have absolutely no stress in our life, if we said, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do absolutely nothing, right? There'd be some pressure or stress that would get us to get out of the bed. Whether it was, I'm hungry, I need to use the bathroom, like all those things, they're stress. They're pressure in our life. And so if we have no stress, no pressure in our life, it's not very hard. It's not easy to be motivated to get things done. And actually stress helps us to experience more motivation. And actually the amount of stress that we are experiencing, there's kind of this threshold effect that it gives us more motivation until we kind of cap out, and then it dives. And so being able to be in that place where we're experiencing enough stress to help us to do the things that we need to do, and anyone who's been played sports or been in theater or something like that recognizes that optimal performance that you get when you have the excitement, the adrenaline, the pressure in the moment. It's not something you can maintain long term. And honestly, if I can do this right, okay, it's like we have this spectrum, right? It's like we need to have enough stress to kind of keep us right around here most of the time, right? This is doing nothing, right? And this is giving us the pressure to kind of do the basic stuff. And then every once in a while, we'll be up here for our optimum amount of performance, right? But this is something that we're not going to maintain very long. And then we're going to go back down here. And so if we can kind of have that as our perspective, if we start going down the other side, then we're going to end up being at burnout. We're going to end up being at breakdown, which is which is what we're trying to prevent by trying to keep it like more in this range of the amount of pressure and stress that we experience.
How does understanding yourself play a role in burnout?
Sometimes when we don't understand ourselves, we set ourselves up for failure. Instead of understanding, oh, I'm the type of person that needs to have alone time. Often it goes back to how we grew up. In my family, most of the people in my family have very outgoing personalities and have a tendency to be very task oriented. And so when we're working out something between us, we can tend to be intense in our discussions. Me and my sisters will have a difference of opinion. We're not even arguing. We're just sharing our opinion. And other people feel that is very intense. But that's how I grew up. And it doesn't feel uncomfortable for me. So, but then other people grow up in homes where it's really, everyone is more laid back and it's just kind of, we do the thing. And when you have that experience, that kind of sets part of your expectation. In my family, I have kids that are both outgoing and both reserved. And so when things feel intense for my reserved kids, I need to pay attention to that. And when things are going too slow for my outgoing kids, I need to pay attention to that. Understanding myself means that I set myself up for things that I'm going to be better at. So I'm not going to take on a project that has 1,000 details in it because my brain will not do that and do it well for a long period of time. I could do it for a short period of time, but not for a long period of time. And so knowing that about myself means I'm not going to choose projects or set myself up for something that I can't do well. And it's partly personality and it's partly value set. It's really important to me as part of my personal value set to do things well. And so that would be a struggle for me if I set myself up to do something that required an amount of attention to detail and energy that I knew would be difficult for me to do. And similarly, I have a really good friend who is super sweet, super supportive, and she is able to walk into an organization, see where the holes are, and plug them easily and quickly. And she would not want to be the person who's in charge of an event or in charge of a project. She wants to come in and be assisting in it. And so if she were to, just knowing that about herself allows her to do the things that she's good at and that bring her joy and help her to feel like she's making a contribution without setting herself up in a way that would make her feel overwhelmed and stressed.
What's your advice for people who are finding themselves in a career having spent decades doing something that they are maybe not born to do, not good at, not what they want to be doing, but they just feel stuck and I could imagine incredibly prone to burnout at this point?
To answer your question, someone who's deep into their career and realizing, wow, this is not working, I'm feeling burnt out. That's a scary place to be. And one of the things that is true of stress is that it's cumulative. And so if you're not doing something to reduce it, it just continues to build and continues to build. And so that's a place where I would encourage someone to take a moment and to reach out to someone who could help them. Someone who either can help them work through what are the things that we can adjust in life to reduce that overall stress level. What are the things that maybe need to be adjusted for a career change or a shift to do something that is still taking what you know and maybe shifting it a little bit to better align it to your personality, your values, and your experiences. And looking at that in perspective of what's your capacity? What is it that you can keep doing? And having someone, a coach, a counselor, someone like that who can give you that one-on-one perspective. And there's opportunities for people who are in that position who say, look, I need to have a weekend kind of a weekend retreat type model. I offer that also as part of what I do in my practice. But I know lots of people that do and can say, okay, let's go through and let's look at what are you doing? What's working? What's not working? What do you want to be doing? And to really help to have an extended period of time to be able to really focus on that and work it out to see what would be a good fit. And then to be able to have some action steps moving forward. Because it might be that if there's more support given for the entire life, instead of looking at it just as the career, but looking at the entire life. And if there's more support in the rest of the life, the rest of the factors of life, would that be enough to be able to continue with what you're doing? Or is it that you really do need to have a shift or a pivot professionally to make a difference?
So I know that setting boundaries is super important to help avoid burnout, and I want to set boundaries, but I'm so bad at it. Can you tell me why is it so hard and what should I be doing? Because I understand the value in setting boundaries, but I just can't seem to do it.
Yes. So part of setting boundaries is being able to look at what they are, because boundaries are not about the other person at all. Boundaries are about us and are about protecting us and protecting our relationships. And when we're parents, it's about protecting our kids too. And so when we look at boundaries, we're looking at them from the perspective of what is it that I need to do to protect myself? And then being able to make the decision in advance. It's like, if you remember back in the 80s when it was just say no to drugs, right? That the idea was if you make up your mind before you're in the situation, then when you're in the situation, it'll be easier to do what you've already decided to do. And so if you can figure out what are those things that I need to do for myself, and sometimes something happens, you're like, oh, I need to make a change. I need to have a boundary there. But if you could think about it in advance and say, okay, these are the things that I'm getting hung up on. What is it that I need the boundary to be for me so that I feel like I'm protecting myself and my relationships? And then being able to, once you figure out that boundary, even writing it down for yourself, even putting it in your phone so that you know, this is the boundary. I need to, let's make up one. What would be something that Anne would be a good example of a boundary that one of your listeners would be needing to have?
Saying yes to too many extracurriculars for the kids or something like that.
Ooh, yes. So one example of a boundary would be for kids with their activities, right? Being able to see what's manageable for us and being able to create that limit in advance. So as when they ask you, can I do this thing or that thing? Well, great, you can do that. These are the amount of activities that you can do. Is that one that you want to choose? And being able to pick those activities that they want to do in advance. And then if something else pops up, it can be a discussion of, do we replace one of the things that you've chosen with something else? Is that what you want to do? Because the boundary is already there. And that is such a thing that's going on in my family too, of being able to pick, because you can't do everything. So being able to pick the things that you want to do, deciding them in advance, makes it easier for everyone. And that can go for us adults with meetings and commitments too, right? This is how many evenings a week that I'm going to let myself be out. You know, I need to be home this many nights per week, and being able to look at that. Or maybe it's per month so that you can flex it because your schedule is different on different days of the week or different weeks of the month. But being able to pick that in advance, and then when something comes up, it's based on that. It's almost like a budget, right? If you have this much money that's set aside, if you have something else come up, you either have to take money from somewhere else or you have to say no. And so similarly with boundaries, I think another thing to think about with boundaries is that I borrowed this idea from an author. I will find her name for you. But the idea of with boundaries, when people push against them, that we have a green, yellow, red light type of take on it. That the first time it's like, hey, green light, this is my boundary. This is something that I can't do. And then yellow light would be, okay, we've already discussed this. I've already told you that this is something that that I can't do, I can't support you in, or I'm not comfortable with. And then the red light is kind of cutting some sort of a tie. So, I mean, you're never going to cut ties with your kids. But if we went back to the example of activities, the green light is discussing in advance, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then the yellow light would be, hey, Mom, I want to do this other thing that I did not say that I wanted to do. And I just want to do it and just add it. So then the yellow light might be, okay, well, we already discussed this. And so this is what we can do. You can replace it, or you can not do that thing. And then the red light would be, okay, we've already discussed this. You brought it up. I already said no. And so now this means that I'm going to say no to the activity, as opposed to giving them the option of switching it out.
So when I think about my personal boundaries, the ones that are hardest to hold firm on are the ones related to my self-care. So I could have all of these great aspirations to go do my, workout class or meditate, but then what will often break that boundary is the needs of my family. I will find myself prioritizing the needs of my family over the self-care boundary that I've set.
Yeah.
What should I do?
It's part of that is, are you creating actionable, realistic boundaries for your self-care? Like, are you picking things that you can do? Because I think sometimes when we think of self-care, we think of bigger things instead of being able to say, you know what, I'm going to incorporate for my self-care, taking 5 minutes to just express gratitude. That's a simple way to be able to support ourselves without it being something that becomes burdensome and that we don't do. It's almost like eating vegetables. I remember taking a class when my kids were young about helping your kids to eat healthy. And it was eating whatever vegetables you'll eat is the best first step to eating vegetables. So whatever exercise is the best that you're actually going to do is the best first step for exercise. And the same with self-care, being able to create, because it feels like a failure of ourselves, right? We're not creating boundaries to ourselves when we're not doing the things that we know that we need to do. And so being able to say, what are the things that I know that I can do, and creating boundaries around self-care, but creating the self-care, the things that we're doing for self-care that we know that we're going to be able to do. And the more that we do them, the easier it will be to do them. And the easier it will be to kind of increase what we're doing for self-care so that we can do that. Another option that you can do is to do something that is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, and doing something that requires you to either spend money or spend time in a way that it feels too costly to not do it. And that can be another way to kind of put yourself in a place where it's like, I have to do this because I have this investment in it.
Love that. I would love for you to spend a few minutes talking about your Burnout Buster Blueprint and how that has helped people shift away from burnout.
Sure. I was realizing in my trauma therapy practice that a lot of the things that people were coming into me for, if they had better tools for managing their stress, they would not have needed therapy. And then I had other clients that I knew that they needed the therapy, but that it was taking longer for them to get the results that they needed because they weren't able to manage the daily stress that was happening, that was reactivating all of the trauma experience that they had before. And so I started taking the things that I learned for myself and that I was using with clients and packaging it up and teaching it as a class. And I actually taught the class for children. I think my youngest student was 4, and teenagers and adults. And so I was teaching them in person. And then I thought, if I could find a way to take this and put it online, that would be great. And so I'm in the process of finishing that up and getting that going so that I can make it available for more people. But I still am teaching in my local area and really enjoying that. I think one of the things that has been really helpful that I've seen with people is that they've had vocabulary for the things that they're experiencing, and being able to understand that there's a normality in what happens when you feel overwhelmed, and being able to say, oh, this is what happens when I feel overwhelmed. I have a name for it. I have my own personal list of things that I realize that happen to me when I'm feeling overwhelmed. Those types of things have been really helpful, because when we feel like we understand ourselves and that we realize that we're experiencing something that's normal, then it really does help us to relax in other areas of our life without that background stress of what's going on with me, what's wrong with me. And so that's a big piece of it. And then the other piece is being able to look to your future, and to one of the activities that I work through with people is creating future histories and allowing them to see what are the things I need to do right now to help me to be in the place that I want to be in the future, and to really map that out in a way that is very hopeful and encouraging, and can really help us to learn to prioritize in today based on what we want for our future.
Do you think that once somebody experiences burnout, that they're more likely to experience it again?
I think how they respond to their experience of burnout makes the biggest difference. There is a concept called post-traumatic growth. And so it's kind of the opposite of post-traumatic stress. When we experience post-traumatic stress, we experience something that is emotionally and often intellectually overwhelming. And when we come back from that, if we do not have support, then it creates the PTSD that we know about, right? It creates that diagnostic profile. But when we're able to experience something overwhelming, and in the midst of that, we receive support and we experience growth, then it actually makes us better and stronger than we were before. And it's similar to if somebody breaks a bone, right? Where the fracture occurred, as the bone heals itself, it's stronger there than it was before. And so we actually can experience burnout and be better and stronger for it, and be less likely to experience it again, to have a burnout resistance if we can take care of it in a healthy way.
And what do you think are the top 2 or 3 things that people need to do to be able to take care of it in a healthy way?
It would be to, number one, look at how you ended up here, so that you can kind of pull back those layers and say, okay, this was going on, this was going on, this was going on. This is what caused me to experience burnout. And then to be able to get that support, individual support, community support. We grow in relationships. We heal from our experiences of, especially emotional, when we have relational problems, we heal from the pain of those things in relationship, whether it's relationship with the same person because we resolve the conflict, or whether it's in relationship with other people, as we're able to grow and we're able to connect with other people. And then I would say the third thing is having some support to do some restructuring. So it might be a spouse that you sit down and you say, okay, we got to work this out. This is not working. How do we address what's going on and what I'm experiencing as a result of all of this? And maybe it's also, instead or in addition, you have a counselor or a coach or someone that can help you, so that you have someone outside of your own head to help you kind of work through what is it that needs to be adjusted to be able to make this better. So I think if you do those 3 things, you get some evaluation of what happened and where you are, have that support to be able to connect with others and be able to kind of regroup and see what needs to be adjusted.
Okay, so if people want to learn more about your work, how can they find you? How do they get a hold of you? Where can they follow you?
So my website is leahlittlebrown.com. And from there, you can learn about my therapy practice and my course. And you can even message me. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you watch this and it's encouraging to you, then definitely make a comment so that you help Anne's podcast. And then please reach out to me. I would love to hear what was helpful for you. If there's anything else that you think would be, that you'd like to see offered, I'm happy to be able to help you guys. However, I actually have a handout that that will be available to take that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that I shared with you and be able to have a printout where you can put it on your refrigerator. It's kid friendly so that you can use it to help yourself and your family when you're feeling pressured and overwhelmed to be able to step back.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks so much for being on the show with us today, Leah.
Thank you, Anne. I really appreciate it.
It's been phenomenal. I've learned so much and I can't wait I've got somebody that I want to actually talk to, have a conversation with about.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them, because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.